Outcome Memories and Forsaken, two very popular Roblox ASIMs that I'm sure pretty much everybody watching this video already knows about. Both of these games have very loyal fan bases and are amazing in their own ways. And due to both games being amazing in their own ways, I didn't want to title this video which game is better, because that's just super subjective to just what you prefer. But there is one thing that we for sure can compare from both games: balancing. Now, I've been thinking about this for a while, so I finally decided to sit down and do some research and try to come to a conclusion. So without further ado, let me not waste any more of you guys' time, and let's find out which game is more balanced: Outcome Memories or Forsaken. Alright, before I begin this video, I do have to get it out of the way that I do like Outcome Memories and Forsaken. This video is strictly constructive criticism, and I'm only comparing the two for entertainment purposes. I have to get that out of the way because you know it's going to be those people in the comments saying stuff like, oh, why do you always have to compare the games, King? Why can't you just enjoy both games, King? King, I hate. Alright, my bad. Just had to get that out of the way. But also, I am very much aware that Outcome Memories was more on the newer side, but that doesn't change the fact that the game was out for around 6 months and Forsaken's only been out for around a year, so that's half of Forsaken's lifespan. And mind you, Outcome Memories only had one killer in it for around 5 months, so 5 months to balance an ASIM with only one killer in it is more than enough time if you ask me. Now let's move on to the structure of this video. I split this video into 3 parts and 3 points. First is the killers of each game, second is the survivors of each game, and third is the maps of each game. 3 categories for 3 different points, and whichever game wins the most points is the most balanced game. So let's go ahead and begin with the killers. Alright, starting with Team Forsaken, the killers we have to work with are Slasher, Cool Kid, John Doe, Noli, 1X, Guest Sixer, and Nosferatu. Now, because Forsaken has a much larger killer roster than Outcome Memories currently has, I'm going to be briefly going over the balancing for Forsaken section. Now, for as many killers as Forsaken has in the game, the balancing is actually pretty decent, surprisingly. Now, of course, upon updates and changes, some killers can be better than others. Like, release Nosferatu was insane, but currently Nosferatu isn't as good as he was on release. Now, in terms of looping, every killer in Forsaken has some way to deal with looping and has some sort of anti-loop. Granted, some killers' anti-loop are much better than others, but at least every killer has at least the slightest way of dealing with looping. Cool Kid has his corrupt nature, John Doe has his traps that he can place, Noli has his explosive AoE damage, 1X has his projectiles, Guest Sixer has the ability to throw projectiles through walls and jump on top of loopable objects, and Nosferatu is Nosferatu, and Slasher has Raging Pace. All of the above are anti-loops. Now, shout out Corso, because I'm going to use a tier list he made for one of his videos where he ranked Forsaken killers, because I actually agree with this list. Now, as you can see in this list, you have Slasher in C tier, not because he's bad, but let's say it's because he doesn't have as many options as the rest of the killers have in Chase. But I actually don't think this is a bad thing. This is because he is the starter killer. He's not necessarily super bad, but he also necessarily isn't super good. He's easy to pick up, and he's also very easy to learn how to play killer in Forsaken with. Now, when it comes to the paid killers in Forsaken, as you can see, none of them have a huge difference in terms of how relative they are to each other. They're all better than the starter killer so that they're worth your money, but there's also not an insane difference on how much better one of them is than the other. Now, yes, Nosferatu is in B tier while John Doe is in S, but this also comes down to skill. I'm sure that most of us can agree a very good Nosferatu player can be just as good as a very good John Doe player. Now, of course, all of this is subjective. You can have your own ranking and how you think the killers are better than each other, but There's one thing that we can all agree on. In the right hands, each killer in Forsaken is just as capable as the other in server wiping for the most part. Now moving on to Outcome Memories killers, this is where it gets feisty. There are currently only 4 killers in Outcome Memories: Fleetway, 2011X, Tripwire, and Colossus. Now, the reason why I said this is where it gets feisty is because unlike in Forsaken, in Outcome Memories, certain killers just aren't as capable as other killers are with doing certain things. For example, Colossus can climb and Fleetway can fly, but 2011X and Tripwire cannot do either, meaning that horizontal movement for 2011X and Tripwire is hell on earth. And yeah, 2011X does have the ability to teleport, but it's at random. You cannot choose the target, meaning that this is not a viable way to deal with horizontal movement unless you're an LMS. And when you have survivors like Silver who can straight up fly upwards, this means killers like 2011X and Tripwire would have to manually make their way back up to wherever Silver is flying to, making looping against 2011X and Tripwire much more effective. And not only that, some killers are just noticeably leagues better than others. On one side of the coin, you have Fleetway, who is basically a jack of all trades whose only downside is that he has an HP bar. And then on the other side of the coin, you have 2011X, who pretty much struggles at everything that Fleetway can do amazing and doesn't really have anything that makes up for it. Not to say that 2011X is exactly bad, but there is an obvious difference between characters like 2011X and Fleetway. It's almost as if every update that they added new killers, the power crept even more. So if you ask me, killer balancing is definitely going to Forsaken, not because Forsaken's balancing is perfect, but because it's clearly much better than Outcome Memories. Now, when it comes to survivors, both games have a relative amount. Forsaken has 11 survivors, whereas Outcome Memories currently has 10. But let's go ahead and reverse the roles this time. Let's start off with Outcome Memories survivor balancing. Spoiler alert, it's terrible. Now, I know I haven't said this already, but I do want to clarify that I am talking about the current versions of both games. Not what happened in the past, and not what the game is going to get updated to. The current version. And if we're talking about the current version of Outcome Memories, Shadow has to be the epitome of unbalance. For those who don't know, Shadow has an ability called Chaos Snap, where he quite literally can stun the executioner from infinite range, with most executioners having no way to avoid this because they don't have counters. And even if you do have a counter, if Shadow decides to use his move from across Narnia, you simply just will not see it coming. But it's not just Shadow. Silver's passive has been one of the hardest things for the Outcome Memories devs to tackle, and it's still very busted till this day. Unfortunately, I don't have video proof of this, but there are areas on You Can't Run and other maps that if Silver flies up to them, characters like Tripwire cannot get to him no matter what, because Tripwire cannot fly and cannot climb. I'm pretty sure a lot of areas like these are bannable, but the fact that they exist just goes to show a lot about the balancing. And then you have Amy and Eggman's questionable balancing during version 0.1, to the point where it felt like at times in the right hands, Amy and Eggman just completely countered 2011X back then. But moving on to Forsaken, the balancing is a lot more broad, because unlike Outcome Memories, 90% of the roster isn't stunners. The most annoying stunner or the most complained about stunner that you would get in Forsaken would be 2-time. But in the current state of the game, that is fixed for the most part. His trick stabs are nowhere near as annoying as they were like 2 months ago. Veronica on release was very busted. Although she's been nerfed to the ground now, I do think she can still be a bit overtuned sometimes. Or maybe I just have a skill issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that Forsaken is still survivor sided, just like Outcome Memories. But for the most part, I think characters like Noob, 007, Shaletsky, Guess, Chance, Dusakar, Builderman, and Taff are all handled balancing wise pretty well. Now there's plenty of area to agree or disagree, but I'm gonna go with Forsaken when it comes to survivor balancing due to them being much more overall consistent. Now, Forsaken has had its ups and downs when it comes to survivor balancing, but I don't remember the last time Forsaken has something as broken as Shadow in their game. Now, moving on to our final category, we have maps. Now, this category might be more even because both games have some terribly survivor-sided maps. But starting with Outcome Memories, no hate to the team because I know they are working on making things better, but we genuinely have some of the worst map design I've ever seen. Green Hill V2 was so bad that people were begging for the original Green Hill back. Trying to find your teammates on that map is genuinely hell, and trying to get around as slow as Colossus is also just terrible. Mystic Cave is terrible to climb on as Colossus, and 2011X has a terrible matchup on that map with horizontal movement characters. And although I don't think Angel Island is that bad of a map, the color and saturation makes it extremely hard to see. Now, although some maps do benefit certain killers in certain ways, like Tripwire having an easier time placing traps in certain areas on Hill Gem, it doesn't make up for how survivor-sided some of the maps can get. Now, moving on to Forsaken, we have some of the most AIDS looping spots on pretty much every map. Some of the most annoying for me personally being these two right here. I just genuinely struggle with them so much for whatever reason. But here's the thing, as much as I hate it, looping is just an unfortunate part of Forsaken's main gameplay. And although yes, sometimes it gets out of hand sometimes in Forsaken, the thing is, in Outcome Memories, there are genuinely spots and you can't run that you can get to as Silver that Tripwire cannot get to at all. So I'd rather have something like Forsaken where it's just an insane skill curve than Outcome Memories where you genuinely have no counterplay. So I'm going to have to give the better map balancing to Forsaken, simply just because Outcome Memories has unwinnable spots, whereas Forsaken just has highly annoying spots at worst. So with that being said, it seems like Forsaken is blowing Outcome Memories out of the water park when it comes to better balancing. Again, I do love both of these games, and I also do understand that both games, especially Outcome Memories, are due for balancing changes in the future constantly. But at this point, I'm just yapping. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree, or if I missed anything, feel free to just let me know. If you disagree, you don't think that Forsaken is more balanced than Outcome Memories, let me know that down in the comments. But make sure to like and subscribe, and with that being said, I'll see y'all boys and girls in the next one.
Don't be afraid to catch feels. Don't be afraid to catch feels. Right drop top and chase through. Right drop top and chase through. I know you ain't afraid to pop pills. I know you ain't afraid to pop pills. Baby, I know you ain't scared to catch feels.